Staff Sergeant James Cooper stood at attention in the gleaming white meeting room of the United Nations building, trying not to stare at the blue-skinned aliens sitting across the table. 6 months ago, these creatures called the Lumini had appeared in Earth's orbit with their massive ships, bringing news that humans weren't alone in the galaxy. Now, Cooper and his Marine unit were here to represent Earth's military forces to these visitors. "Fascinating," said the lead alien, Ambassador Bright Light, as humans called him, since his real name was impossible to pronounce. "Your species evolved on what we classify as a Class 12 death world, yet you show no signs of aggressive behavior." He tapped his long fingers on the table, making a soft clicking sound. Cooper fought back a smile. No signs of aggressive behavior. He had spent 15 years in the Marine Corps and had seen action in 3 different conflicts. But orders were orders, and his job today was to play nice. "We try our best to be peaceful, sir," Cooper replied, keeping his voice steady and professional. Next to him, Private Miller shifted uncomfortably in his dress blues. The alien delegation whispered among themselves, their translators creating a quiet buzz of background noise. Earth's gravity was too strong for them, so they sat in special floating chairs that kept them comfortable. Their delicate bodies, evolved on a low-gravity world, would have been crushed under their own weight otherwise. "Your genetic markers suggest that your species should be naturally docile," another alien said, this one wearing what looked like a scientist's robe. "The harsh conditions of your world should have made you cautious and non-confrontational, like other Deathworld species we've encountered." Cooper exchanged glances with Lieutenant Reynolds, who stood by the wall with her arms crossed. They both knew better. Humans weren't peaceful because nature made them that way. They were peaceful because they had learned the hard way what happened when they weren't. "We would love to learn more about your military traditions," Ambassador Brightlight continued, "though I assume they're mostly ceremonial, like your impressive uniforms." Before Cooper could respond, a sharp alarm blared through the building. The aliens jumped in their floating chairs, their blue skin turning a pale purple in what Cooper guessed was fear. "Security breach in Sector 7, a voice announced over the intercom. "Unidentified intruder." Cooper's training kicked in instantly. "Everyone stay calm," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Miller, secure that door. Reynolds, coordinate with building security." His team moved with practiced precision, their ceremonial skills suddenly very real. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the Marines transformed from polite diplomats into a coordinated military unit. Cooper pulled out his sidearm, loaded with non-lethal rounds, as per diplomatic protocols, and took up a defensive position. The intruder, as it turned out, was just a confused civilian who had wandered into the wrong area. The situation was resolved in minutes, but the alien delegation had seen something they hadn't expected: humans acting with military efficiency. "Most interesting," Ambassador Bright Light said after everything calmed down. "You moved with such purpose, such coordination. We had assumed your species would freeze or flee when faced with potential danger." Cooper holstered his weapon and resumed his formal posture. "With all due respect, Ambassador, humanity's relationship with danger is complicated." "Complicated." The alien scientist leaned forward in his floating chair. "Please explain." "Perhaps another time." Lieutenant Reynolds cut in smoothly, recognizing the diplomatic minefield ahead. "We wouldn't want to overwhelm you with too much information at once." As the meeting wrapped up, Cooper caught fragments of the aliens' conversation through their translators. Remarkable restraint. "Nothing like the simulations predicted. Need to revise our understanding." Walking out of the building later that day, Private Miller spoke up. "Sarge, why didn't we tell them about our actual military capabilities?" Cooper looked up at the alien ships visible in the evening sky, their sleek forms reflecting the setting sun. "Because, Miller, sometimes it's better to let people figure things out for themselves. They think we're harmless because we evolved on a dangerous world." He smiled slightly. "They'll learn eventually that we're not peaceful because we had to be. We're peaceful because we choose to be. Little did the aliens know, they would soon understand exactly what that meant, and why humans had needed to create things like the Geneva Convention in the first place. Lieutenant Lisa Reynolds stood in front of a large screen in the Galactic Council's Earth Embassy, trying to explain human military history to a room full of confused aliens. The presentation wasn't going well. "So, you're saying humans fought each other?" Ambassador Brightlight's translator conveyed his shock. "But why? Weren't there enough resources on your world?" Reynolds took a deep breath. "It wasn't always about resources, Ambassador. Sometimes it was about ideas, beliefs, or territory." The alien scientist from their first meeting, now known as Dr. Blue, raised one of his 4 hands. "But that makes no sense. A species from a death world should focus only on survival. Fighting for ideas is—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Wasteful." In the back of the room, Sergeant Cooper watched as Reynolds clicked to the next slide, showing ancient military formations. The aliens' floating chairs moved back slightly, as if the mere image of organized warfare made them uncomfortable. "Human warfare evolved over time," Reynolds continued. "We learned to fight smarter, not just harder. We developed strategies, tactics." "Impossible." A new alien diplomat interrupted. His floating chair zoomed forward. "Are you claiming your species deliberately studied how to fight better? That goes against all known Deathworld psychology." Cooper stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said to Reynolds, "maybe we should show them the training video." Reynolds nodded and pulled up footage from last month's Marine Corps training exercise. The room fell silent as they watched humans moving in perfect coordination, using cover, communicating with hand signals, and executing complex maneuvers. "This is disturbing," Ambassador Brightlight said slowly. "You practice warfare for no immediate survival reason." "We practice to be ready," Cooper explained, "to protect ourselves and others if needed." Dr. Blue's skin had turned an even paler shade of blue. "But your world's harsh conditions should have made you cautious, risk-averse. This shows planning, preparation, deliberate development of combat skills." Reynolds switched off the video. "Maybe we should take a break." "No," Ambassador Brightlight insisted. "We need to understand. Show us more." Reynolds glanced at Cooper, who nodded. She pulled up another video, this one showing a military parade. The aliens watched in silence as tanks rolled by, aircraft flew overhead, and thousands of soldiers marched in perfect formation. "This is ceremonial, yes?" one of the diplomats asked hopefully. "Like your dress uniforms?" "Those vehicles and weapons are real," Cooper said quietly. "We maintain them in case they're needed." The room erupted in worried chirping sounds as the aliens discussed among themselves. Their translators caught fragments. "Complete misunderstanding. Potentially dangerous. Need to reassess." Ambassador Brightlight raised all 4 hands for silence. "Lieutenant Reynolds, are you saying that humans not only survived your death world, but mastered it so completely that you had time to develop organized warfare?" "Yes, Ambassador. And you maintain these capabilities even in times of peace." "We do." The ambassador's translator crackled with what seemed like nervous energy. "Then we must ask, what prevents humans from using these capabilities against other species?" The room grew very quiet. Cooper and Reynolds exchanged looks. How could they explain concepts like military restraint to beings who thought warfare itself was impossible for their species? "That's a complex question, Ambassador," Reynolds said carefully. "But the simple answer is, we choose not to." "You choose?" Dr. Blue sounded baffled. "Yes," Cooper added. "Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. We learned that lesson the hard way." As the aliens filed out of the room later, their floating chairs humming quietly, Cooper overheard Ambassador Brightlight speaking to Dr. Blue. "We may need to reconsider our classification of humans. They are not what we thought them to be." Reynolds packed up her presentation materials, shaking her head. "They still don't get it, do they, Sarge?" "No," Cooper replied, watching the aliens leave. They think we're peaceful because we're weak. They haven't figured out yet that we're peaceful because we're strong enough to make that choice. Little did they know, events would soon force them to demonstrate exactly what that strength meant. Major Thomas Walker wasn't expecting to give a history lesson today. He stood before the Galactic Council's main chamber, surrounded by hundreds of alien representatives in their floating chairs. The massive room, with its high crystal ceiling and glowing walls, made him feel small in his dress blues. Major, Ambassador Brightlight's voice echoed through the chamber. Please explain why humans created rules for warfare. Our research shows no other species has done this. Walker cleared his throat. Well, sir, the Geneva Convention came from our understanding that even in war, there must be limits. The chamber filled with confused murmuring. Dr. Blue floated forward in his chair. Limits? But why limit warfare if you must fight at all? Because without limits, war becomes pure destruction, Walker explained. He tapped his tablet, and images appeared on the huge screen behind him. These are images from our Second World War, over a century ago. The aliens stared at pictures of destroyed cities, refugee camps, and the aftermath of atomic bombs. Their skin colors shifted through various shades, showing their distress. Your species did this. Ambassador Brightlight's translator couldn't hide his horror. To each other. Yes, Walker said quietly. And that's why we created rules. To make sure it never happened again. A new alien representative, one Walker hadn't met before, raised two of their hands. But this makes no sense. You developed rules because you were too good at fighting. Because you were too effective at warfare. Exactly. Walker nodded. We learned we needed boundaries. Lines we wouldn't cross. He switched to a new slide, showing modern peacekeeping missions. These rules don't make us weaker. They make us stronger. They help us fight only when necessary, and only in ways that don't destroy everything we're fighting for. Dr. Blue's floating chair drifted closer to the screen. What happens if someone breaks these rules? Then they face consequences, Walker explained. We call them war crimes. They're punished severely. The chamber erupted in discussion. The translators struggled to keep up with all the voices. They punish themselves for fighting wrong. How can there be a wrong way to fight? This species is more complex than we thought. Ambassador Brightlight raised all four hands for silence. Major Walker, are you saying humans are so skilled at warfare that you created rules to limit yourselves? Yes, Ambassador. And you enforce these rules even against your own people. Especially against our own people. The ambassador's skin shifted to a deep purple, a color Walker hadn't seen before. Then help us understand. What happens when someone ignores these rules? Walker thought carefully before answering. Sir, have you ever heard the phrase, playing with fire? Our translators understand the concept. Well, breaking the Geneva Convention is like playing with fire while sitting on a mountain of explosives. The consequences are severe. In the back of the chamber, Walker noticed Sergeant Cooper and Lieutenant Reynolds watching. They had warned him this might be a difficult conversation. One last question, Major, Dr. Blue said. These rules, they apply only to fighting other humans, yes. The room grew very quiet. Walker looked directly at the alien scientist. The rules apply to how we fight, Doctor, not who we fight. As the session ended, Walker overheard two alien representatives talking near the exit. Did you understand what he meant? Yes, they created rules because they were too good at destruction. But what happens if someone pushes them to break those rules? I don't think we want to find out. Later, in the Earth Embassy's break room, Cooper found Walker staring out the window at the alien ships in orbit. Rough session, sir? Cooper asked. They just don't get it, Cooper, Walker sighed. They think the Geneva Convention makes us weak. They'll understand eventually, Cooper replied, though I hope they never have to learn the hard way. Unfortunately, as reports of aggressive alien activity began reaching Earth, It seemed the galaxy might soon discover exactly why humans had needed to create rules for warfare in the first place. Private First Class Robert Miller sat at his monitoring station in the Earth Embassy, watching alien news feeds scroll across his screens. His job was simple: look for any threats to human interests in space. For 3 months, it had been boring work. Until today. "Sir," Miller called out to Sergeant Cooper, "you need to see this." Cooper walked over, coffee cup in hand. On the screen, shaky footage showed large black ships attacking a peaceful colony world. The inhabitants, a species known for their farming and art, were running from weapons fire. "Those ships," Cooper said quietly, "they're Cortax design." The Cortax were new to the galactic community. They had appeared 2 months ago, claiming to be peaceful traders. But Miller had noticed something odd about their movements. "Sarge, look at this." Miller pulled up a star map. Every world they visited has gone dark shortly after. No communications, no trade, nothing. Lieutenant Reynolds walked in just then, her face serious. "The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. They want our observer team there in an hour." In the council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. The alien representatives argued in their floating chairs, their translators creating a chaos of worried voices. Ambassador Brightlight looked older somehow, his blue skin pale. "The Cortax representatives claim these are merely trade disputes," he announced. "They suggest we continue diplomatic talks." "Trade disputes." Reynolds stood up. "Ambassador, we've analyzed their attack patterns. They're systematically targeting civilian populations." Dr. Blue's floating chair drifted forward. "But surely they can be reasoned with. Violence is not the answer." Miller, standing at the back of the room, couldn't stay quiet. "Sir, I've been tracking their movements. This isn't random. They're attacking the weakest worlds first, the ones with no defenses." The chamber erupted in worried chirps and whistles. Cooper stepped forward. "The human military can help. We have experience dealing with this kind of threat." "No." Ambassador Brightlight's translator crackled with emotion. "We cannot resort to violence. It goes against all Galactic Council principles." Reynolds tried again. "Ambassador, sometimes you need to fight to protect peace. Like you humans do." A new representative spoke up. "With your wars and your rules for killing, we are not like you." Cooper watched as more colonies went dark on the big display screen. The Cortax were moving faster now, bolder. They knew no one would stop them. Back at the embassy, Miller showed Cooper and Reynolds his latest findings. "The Cortax are gathering a massive fleet here." He pointed to a spot on the map. "Their next target will be the Lumini colony world. Over 50,000 civilians." "And the council?" Cooper asked Reynolds. "Still debating." She slammed her hand on the desk. "They'll debate until every peaceful world is under Cortax control." Miller looked at the latest refugee reports. "These civilians don't have time for debates." Cooper stood by the window, watching Earth's defense fleet in orbit. Brand new ships built with a mix of human and alien technology. Ships the Council had called unnecessarily aggressive in design. "The Council won't act," Cooper said finally. "They don't understand that sometimes you have to fight to keep the peace." Reynolds nodded. "And the Cortax know it. That's why they're getting bolder. No one has ever stood up to them." Miller's computer beeped with a new alert. "Sarge, the Cortax just hit another farming world. No survivors this time." Cooper's face hardened. "Get me a secure line to Earth Command." It's time they understood why humans have militaries, why we train for war even in peacetime. "And the Council?" Reynolds asked. "Better to ask forgiveness than permission," Cooper replied. "Sometimes you have to act, even when everyone tells you to stay quiet." As they prepared their reports for Earth Command, Miller watched more worlds going dark on his screen. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson. Peace wasn't the absence of strength. Sometimes, peace required the will to fight for it. The emergency alarm woke Sergeant Cooper at 300 hours. A Cortax fleet had just appeared near New Haven, a colony world with both human and alien civilians. Cooper and his unit were on their ship and moving within 20 minutes, even though the Galactic Council hadn't approved military action. Status report, Cooper called out as he entered the bridge of the U.S. Defender. Earth had launched 3 ships without Council approval: the Defender, Guardian, and Protector. Lieutenant Reynolds looked up from her tactical screen. The Cortax have already landed troops. They're moving towards the main colony. She paused. Sir, there are 10,000 civilians in that settlement. Any word from the Council? Still debating. Reynolds' voice was bitter. They've sent another strongly worded message to the Cortax. Private Miller worked at his station, monitoring enemy movements. Sarge, I'm picking up civilian distress calls. The Cortax are. They're not taking prisoners this time. Cooper made his decision. Launch all drop pods. Full combat deployment. The bridge crew stared at him. This would be the first time humans openly fought another alien species. Sir, Reynolds said quietly, this goes against Council orders. We can face their complaints later, Cooper replied. Right now, those civilians need help. Marine drop pods streaked through New Haven's atmosphere like falling stars. Cooper's pod hit ground 2 kilometers from the main colony, right behind enemy lines. As his unit assembled, they could hear the sound of Cortax weapons in the distance. Remember your training, Cooper told his Marines as they moved out. We're here to protect civilians, not for revenge. The Cortax never saw them coming. They had gotten used to attacking worlds that couldn't fight back. When the first squad of human Marines hit their rear guard, they didn't even know how to react. Team 2, left flank. Cooper ordered through his radio. Team 3, push up the middle. Remember your fire disciplines. Reynolds coordinated from the Defender, using the ship's sensors to direct troops. Cooper, you've got 30 Cortax troops moving towards the civilian shelter. They're not watching their backs. The Marines moved like shadows through the colony streets. Their training showed in every move, every shot. The Cortax, used to simple smash-and-grab attacks, had no defense against proper military tactics. Please help, a voice called out in broken English. An alien child, one of the artistic species the Cortax had attacked before, was trapped under some rubble. Miller, get that kid out of there, Cooper ordered. Williams, Jones, cover him. As Miller helped the child, Cooper saw something that made his blood run cold. The Cortax were setting up heavy weapons, aiming at the civilian shelters. Not happening, Cooper growled. He switched to the General Command channel. All units, priority target at Grid 7. Heavy weapons, preparing to fire on civilians. The response was immediate. Marine snipers took out the Cortax gunners. Combat engineers disabled their weapons. Infantry teams pushed forward, drawing fire away from civilian areas. From her position on the Defender, Reynolds watched in amazement as the alien representatives on their emergency channel fell silent. They were seeing humans fight for the first time. Are they protecting the civilians? Ambassador Brightlight's voice was shocked. Even the non-human ones. Of course they are, Dr. Blue replied slowly. Remember what Major Walker said about their rules of war. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the Cortax had retreated, leaving behind their weapons and their wounded. Cooper's Marines had secured the colony, treated all casualties, even enemy ones, and established a defensive perimeter. Sergeant Cooper, Reynolds called over the radio. The Council is demanding an explanation for our unauthorized military action. Cooper watched as his medics treated injured civilians, both human and alien. An alien child, the one Miller had saved, was helping hand out water to refugees. Tell them we'll explain everything, Cooper replied. But first, ask them something. Would they rather we had followed their rules and let these civilians die? The Council's response channel was silent for a long time. Finally, Ambassador Brightlight spoke. Perhaps we need to reconsider our understanding of humanity's military nature. Cooper smiled grimly. They were finally starting to understand. Colonel Michael Anderson stood on the bridge of the carrier U.S. Normandy, watching holographic displays of the battle unfolding across 3 star systems. After the success at New Haven, Earth had finally received permission to help fight the Cortax. Now, humanity would show the galaxy how they really fought. Status report. Anderson called out to his command staff. Lieutenant Reynolds, recently promoted to his tactical officer, responded quickly. The Cortax are falling back in all sectors, sir. They've never faced an organized military response before. On the main screen, hundreds of human ships moved in perfect formation. Marines in drop pods struck Cortax positions with surgical precision. Fighter squadrons protected civilian evacuation ships. Every move was coordinated, planned, professional. Sir, Private Miller, also transferred to the carrier, called from his station. Ambassador Brightlight is requesting permission to observe from our bridge. Anderson nodded. Granted. It's time they saw how we really fight. The ambassador's floating chair hummed as he entered the bridge. His skin had turned a pale blue at the sight of so many warships moving together. This is impossible, he said through his translator. Your ships move like they're one mind. How? Training, Ambassador, Anderson replied. Years and years of training. They watched as a Cortax fleet tried to attack a civilian transport. Before they could fire a single shot, human ships appeared from behind a moon, cutting off their escape. Marine boarding teams launched, their pods hitting Cortax ships with perfect accuracy. Sergeant Cooper's team has secured the lead Cortax vessel, Reynolds reported. They're downloading their tactical data now. The ambassador's translator crackled. You're taking prisoners, even after what they did. Of course, Anderson said. Those are the rules of war. Dr. Blue, who had arrived with the ambassador, floated closer to the tactical display. But they showed no mercy to their victims. Why show mercy to them? Because that's what makes us different from them, Anderson explained. We fight to protect, not to destroy. On the screen, human ships formed a defensive line around a group of refugee ships. The Cortax had never seen anything like it. They were used to victims who couldn't fight back, not an organized military force that could outthink and outfight them at every turn. Colonel Miller called out, Cortax ships are sending out surrender signals in Sector 7. Anderson allowed himself a small smile. Accept their surrender. Send in Marine teams to secure their weapons. The ambassador watched in amazement as human forces quickly secured the surrendering ships, treated the wounded Cortax, and maintained perfect discipline. Your warriors, he said slowly, they fight with both strength and restraint. We didn't think this was possible. That's because you thought peace meant weakness, Reynolds explained. We learned a long time ago that real peace comes from being strong enough to defend it. A new alert flashed on the main screen. A massive Cortax fleet had appeared, larger than any they'd seen before. They're targeting civilian worlds, Miller reported. All of them at once. Anderson stood straighter. Send word to all ships. Implement Battle Plan Delta. Protect those civilians at all costs. The ambassador's translator caught the change in Anderson's voice. You knew they would do this. We planned for it, Anderson replied. That's what humans do. We plan, we prepare, and when the time comes, we act. The bridge crew watched as hundreds more human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Each ship knew its role. Each Marine knew their job. The Cortax were about to learn why humans had military academies, training programs, and centuries of tactical knowledge. Ambassador, Anderson said quietly, you're about to see why we created rules for warfare. Because without rules, without limits, he paused as the first shots were fired. We're really very good at it. The galaxy was about to learn an important lesson. Humans weren't peaceful because they were weak. They were peaceful because they knew exactly how good they were at war. Corporal Amanda Peters stood before the Galactic Council, her combat armor still showing scars from the recent battles. The massive chamber was packed with representatives from every species. Even the Cortax, now defeated, had sent observers. "Explain to us," Ambassador Brightlight said, his translator calm but curious. "Why did humans create the Geneva Convention?" Peters looked at the faces around her. The aliens had watched humans fight. They had seen Earth's military power. Now they wanted to understand. "We created it," she said clearly, "because we learned how dangerous we could be." The chamber was silent. Dr. Blue's floating chair moved forward. "But you defeated the Cortax so easily. Why limit such power?" Peters tapped her armor's computer, and images appeared on the chamber's main screen. They showed human history, ancient battles, modern wars, and finally, the peace that came after. "Look at these pictures," she said. "This is what humans did to each other before we made rules for war. We were too good at fighting, too effective at destroying. We had to stop ourselves." The alien representatives murmured among themselves. They had thought humans were naturally peaceful because they came from a harsh world. Now they were learning the truth. In the recent battles, a new representative spoke up. "We watched your warriors. They could have killed all the Cortax, but they didn't. They took prisoners, treated their wounded, accepted surrenders." "Yes," Peters nodded, "because those are the rules we follow." Ambassador Brightlight's skin had turned a thoughtful shade of blue. "You mean you could have been more aggressive?" "Sir," Peters said quietly, "what you saw was humans fighting with rules and limits. What you saw was humans being careful." The chamber erupted in discussion. The translators struggled to keep up. They were being careful. That was them holding back. How powerful are they really? Sergeant Cooper, standing at the back of the chamber, watched with pride as Peters explained. She had been on the front lines, showing aliens firsthand how humans fought with both strength and mercy. "The Geneva Convention," Peters continued, "isn't about making us weaker. It's about making sure we use our strength wisely." Dr. Blue's translator crackled with excitement. "So when Major Walker said these rules make you stronger, he meant that they keep us human," Peters finished. "They remind us why we fight, to protect, not to destroy." On the main screen, images showed human Marines evacuating alien civilians, treating enemy wounded, and accepting Cortax surrenders. Next to these, older images showed Earth's brutal wars, a reminder of why humans created rules for fighting. "We don't follow these rules because we're weak," Peters explained. "We follow them because we're strong enough to choose how we fight." The Cortax observers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had learned this lesson the hard way. Their attacks on civilian worlds had made them look strong. But against trained human soldiers fighting with both skill and restraint, they had found themselves outmatched at every turn. "Your species evolved on a world that should have made you cautious," Ambassador Brightlight said slowly. "Instead, it made you powerful beyond our understanding. Yet you choose to limit this power." "Ambassador," Peters smiled slightly, "the most dangerous person in a room isn't the one who wants to fight. It's the one who knows how to fight but chooses not to." Cooper watched as understanding finally dawned in the alien faces. They had thought humans were peaceful because they had to be. Now they understood that humans were peaceful because they chose to be, even though they could be anything else. "We created the Geneva Convention," Peters concluded, "not because we're afraid of war, but because we're very, very good at it. And being good at something dangerous means being careful with that power." The chamber was silent as her words sank in. The galaxy was finally understanding what humans had known for centuries. True strength isn't about how much damage you can do. It's about how much damage you choose not to do. 1 year after the Cortax conflict, Staff Sergeant James Cooper stood in his dress blues before the new Joint Galactic Defense Council. The massive chamber looked different now. Instead of just floating chairs for alien representatives, there were seats designed for all species, including humans. "The Council recognizes Earth's military delegation," Ambassador Brightlight announced, his translator now perfectly tuned to human speech patterns. "Sergeant Cooper, please present your report." Cooper stepped forward. Behind him, Lieutenant Reynolds and Private Miller stood at attention. They had all changed over the past year. The galaxy had changed too. The joint training program is going well, Cooper reported. 27 species have joined our military education system. They're learning not just how to fight, but when to fight, and more importantly, when not to fight. Dr. Blue, now head of the Council's Military Science Division, moved his floating chair closer. And they all wish to learn human military doctrine. Yes, sir, Cooper nodded. Especially the parts about rules of engagement and civilian protection. The chamber's main screen showed images from the new Galactic Military Academy. Alien soldiers trained alongside human Marines, learning Earth's military traditions. They studied not just tactics and weapons, but also the Geneva Convention and military ethics. Remarkable, Ambassador Brightlight said. A year ago, we thought your species was peaceful because you were weak. We couldn't have been more wrong. Reynolds stepped forward with her own report. The Cortax Rehabilitation Program is also showing success. Their new government has adopted human-style military discipline and ethics. They're even helping protect civilian shipping lanes now. The ambassador's skin turned a pleased shade of blue. They learned their lesson well. They had good teachers, Miller added with a small smile. He remembered how shocked the Cortax had been when human medics treated their wounded during the war. It had changed their whole view of warfare. Cooper continued his report. We've established defense treaties with 15 peaceful worlds. They know now that being peaceful doesn't mean being defenseless. The chamber's mood was different from a year ago. Where there had been fear of human military power, now there was respect. Where there had been confusion about human nature, now there was understanding. Tell me, Sergeant, Dr. Blue asked, what is the most common question your new alien students ask? Cooper smiled. They all ask the same thing, sir. How can humans be so good at war, yet choose peace? And what do you tell them? I tell them what we learned long ago, Cooper replied. That being strong means having the power to fight and the wisdom to avoid fighting when possible. Ambassador Brightlight's translator hummed thoughtfully. Your species still surprises us. You created rules for war because you were too good at it. You train for combat so you can better keep peace. These seemed like contradictions to us once. Not contradictions, Ambassador Reynolds explained. Just different parts of the same truth. We're not peaceful because we're weak. We're peaceful because we're strong enough to have that choice. The chamber's main screen showed new images, joint human-alien peacekeeping missions, military training exercises, and diplomatic meetings. Earth's influence had spread, but not through conquest. It had spread through understanding. The galaxy is changing, Dr. Blue observed. Thanks to humans, we're learning that true strength isn't about ability to destroy. It's about the choice to protect. Cooper looked at his team. Reynolds, Miller, and all the others who had helped the galaxy understand humanity's true nature. They had done more than win a war. They had changed how an entire galaxy thought about peace and strength. One final question. Ambassador Brightlight said, what do you think the future holds for human-alien military cooperation? Cooper thought about all they had learned and taught over the past year. I think, sir, we'll keep teaching what humans learned the hard way, that the strongest warriors aren't the ones who always fight. They're the ones who know when not to. As the session ended, Cooper watched aliens and humans leaving together, talking about defense plans and peace treaties. The galaxy had finally understood what Earth had known for centuries. Sometimes the best way to prevent a fight is to be very, very good at fighting.